Hello, welcome to Life with Francy podcast, a place where you will find all types of conversation like mental health, self-love, self-care, trauma, hobbies, and more. With this podcast, I want to create a place where we support one another in business and personal life. Hope you enjoy this episode. Now, let's get the show started. On today's episode, I have the pleasure to talk to Jared Moses, and he is in his brand is the mentally ill filmmaker. So I am so excited. It's about mental health, so I can't wait to start talking to him. Welcome, Jared, to the show. Tell us,
Hi,
what is life with you?
Hi, how are you? Thank you for having me. I truly do appreciate it. Yeah, I've been doing the whole podcasting thing myself for a little while. Off and on for a few years, different podcast projects, but most recently I started doing the mentally ill filmmaker podcast, where I just week in, week out, I talk about the struggles that I deal with, um, trying to become a professional filmmaker, as well as I do once a month, I do an interview with a creative, and we talk about, their background and stuff. But I typically just try to give my advice based on the things I've been through, as well as some of the stuff that I'm coming up against and struggles that I'm having. Because it's tough to
Yeah.
be creative as well as dealing with mental health stuff.
Yeah, well, I usually ask like how your mission started, but it seems like it's more like me, whereas I have struggled for so long and now I just want to help people out there,
Mm-hmm.
So which was like the turning point where you like, oh, I need to help other people. I'm not
Um,
alone.
well, I guess we're gonna start a little bit heavy, but for me, it started where it was after, I want to say, after my fourth suicide attempt. I had a conversation with a friend of mine who told me that I don't get to quit, that my story, the things that I'm going through, I owe it to the people that are going to hear my story that haven't heard it yet, to keep going. And that the experience that I have, the things that I've been through, the stuff that I've dealt with, there are people out there that are dealing with it just like I am. Either some of them dealing with the same exact thing, some of them dealing with similar things, but me being present, me being in the world, me sharing my experience, me talking about it is going to help someone. And I'm not obsessed with getting big numbers or large audiences. If I can help just one person who feels or has felt like I feel, then that's worth it. And that ultimately got me started on my mission, to try to talk about mental health publicly. And then I started to realize that as a filmmaker, it's a conversation that's not often had. Mental health, we as creatives in general, but specifically in the filmmaking industry, it's you'll hear about it from certain actors or people like that, but just overall, as far as like behind the scenes, it's not something that's often talked about. And so I figured, creating a podcast that sort of talked about some of the stuff that we as filmmakers deal with, or any creator for that matter deals with. I thought it would be very, very useful. So that's why I decided to double down on what I love to do, as well as what I deal with and what I know in and out. And I've navigated the world with for over 30 years. So
Nice. I love it. And I love it that you're still here and we got to meet and we're
thank
on
you.
this mission and help out other people to not feel alone
Right.
and to understand like your darkest days is still a season
Mm-hmm.
and there's more better things in the future. But yeah, sometimes when we're there in the darkest days, we don't see the light,
Mm-hmm.
and
Exactly.
I'm glad that you just one step forward, one day at a
Right.
time, 1 hour at a time sometimes. But yeah, so have you always been interested in filmmaking?
Yeah. I mean, for the most part, since I was a little kid, I loved filmmaking. I loved the art of it. When I was around, I want to say maybe 7 or 8 years old, my mom explained to me exactly how film worked, because I had a completely different idea of how it worked. I had seen plays and things like that, so I thought that, when a movie was on television, actors went to the studios and they were performing live all the time. I had no idea that it was like this set amount of months that people worked together and put this thing together and created it, and now it's lasting for all time. And when I found that out, I thought I could have an imagination. I have my imagination, and I could have a thought, and I can have an idea, and that idea can be worked on by multiple people and then live on way after I'm gone from the world. And that's really, really cool. And I really want to be a part of that. I've always loved storytelling. That's been my thing since I was a very, even small, even younger than 8. I was storytelling. And so I learned how to do screenwriting and things like that when I was a teenager. But I only recently came into the getting behind the camera and actually bringing those stories to life. That's something I've only done within the last, like, I want to say 2 years.
That's awesome. That is
Yeah.
so cool. Yeah. So tell us more about it, this new journey.
So it started around COVID. So when COVID started, I lost my job. Me and my wife, we worked for the same company, and both the company went out of business. And so my wife ended up getting another job, and that job covered all of our bills and everything. And so she told me to take a year to find the thing that I wanted to do, that I could do. That it didn't matter if I got paid or not. Just find the thing you want to do. And so I said, I had been making excuses for so long uh, for not jumping into the filmmaking thing. And I said, you know what? I'm actually gonna try to get that going. And so I tried that. I did the whole online. There's so many online schools and stuff for it, and they were good, but they weren't as intense as I wanted them to be. So I ended up hiring a coach, or not so much a coach, but like a mentor or a tutor who would teach me. And so he's been teaching me stuff and has been giving me assignments and things like that. So I've been doing that and getting better and better at it as I go. And I found like a new love for it. It's almost I find that for me to stay mentally uh, mentally fortified, I have to be working on things. I have to be doing things. And the thing with film is that there's always something to do, like always. So you have to make sure that you are staying on top of all of your, all the tasks that you have, all of the goals that you have, making sure that you're able to do that keeps me like in check as far as mentally. I don't drift. I don't allow myself to get. I mean, I still have my moments. Obviously, you have moments of getting down. But I just found that the more and more I work on film, the more and more I realize that this is not only my calling, but it's almost like my therapy in a way. And I thoroughly enjoy it, and it's been fantastic.
I love it. Yeah. For me it's the podcast, you just keep going and gives you life, and
Yeah,
once you find that, it gives you purpose as well.
right.
So I love it. But yeah, what else do you want my listeners to know about you and what you offer?
Yeah, well, for me, I just mostly I want people to get out there and try things. That's the thing that I'm really promoting for people. I really want, like, so much of what we do or we don't do is based off the things we're afraid of and the things we feel majorly uncomfortable with. I know for me, so when we talk about mental health and we talk about anxiety being something that a lot of people deal with. And I think that a lot of people don't try things based on the level of anxiety that they have towards it. For me, new things in general are super, they cause major amounts of anxiety for me. And that's typically because it's unknown. It's scary to do. And I'm really big on just telling people, get out there and try something new. And it doesn't have to be all at once. Like, you don't have to go all in on something. Like, learn to grant yourself a little bit of grace and say, hey, this is new to me. It's not, I'm not like a professional at this thing yet. So like, if you, let's say for instance, you want to go, I don't know, rock climbing, for instance, and that drives you crazy or makes you really nervous. instead of saying, okay, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to climb a mountain, you can just go and do something where you go to a small area where climb a hill, do something small, and just, and every single time you do it, take it one step further. But, I find that the idea of giving yourself grace and being kind to yourself is really, really important in trying new things. Because I know me personally, I have a tendency of being really hard on myself. And when I'm hard on myself, I'm not very kind to myself. And so like if I don't do something that I set out to do, like if for instance I say I want to make a short film and I don't do that short film because for whatever reason it intimidated me, made me super anxious, whatever, I'll just treat myself so badly because I didn't do the thing that I wanted to do. And instead of doing that, I tend to make sure now I try to make sure that I set smaller goals and just try to do them one step at a time. So instead of saying, I'm going to make a short film, I say, okay, well, today I'm going to set up my camera. That's all I'm going to do. That's the only thing I'm going to do today. And once I do that, it's done. I've got a small victory. I'm moved up. Tomorrow I'm going to set up my lights. I'm going to do that. That's all I'm going to do, and then so on and so forth, and just one step at a time. And on the days where I don't do the thing I set out to do, I just remember to say, it's okay. It's all right that you didn't do it today. You can do it tomorrow. And just granting myself grace, giving myself um, tiny steps and celebrating small victories. That is what I try to advocate for everybody that I talk to. Make sure, because I talk to people all the time and they're always so um, hard on themselves for the things that they don't do and the things that they want to do but they just can't get past it, and then they fail to acknowledge the small things that they accomplished, the smaller things, like even if you don't do any of the major things you planned on, getting out of bed in the morning, making your bed, if you're taking medication, taking your medication, taking a shower, those little things that seem so insignificant, those are actually victories because those things are really, really hard to do sometimes, especially I know for me dealing with depression when I'm in like the pit of my depression, those even those little things are like really, really difficult to do. So just get out and do things, try things, and if you don't succeed at it, grant grace. That's the number one thing I could suggest for anybody.
Yeah, no, I love that. I just started giving myself grace not too long ago. I would say like less than a year. So
Mm,
I'm glad that you're saying that as well. Like, loving yourself is important as well
right.
too. I'm in like I think it's at my almost 2 year anniversary of loving myself.
Fantastic.
So
Congratulations.
yeah, yeah. Thank you, thank you. So it's not an easy journey, but it's a lot of work, and you have to be intentional about that work.
Hmm.
And it starts with just looking for different tools and resources that work for you. And
Hmm.
then something that might have worked for me, it doesn't work for you. But
That's
then it
true.
gives you an idea of like,
Right.
oh, okay, that's in the hobby category. Let
Mhm.
me look for other hobbies that I might enjoy.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. I had a question for you. You said that you started this podcast for a while ago. How long ago did you start it?
I think it's yeah, a year and 4 months.
Wow.
So it
Okay.
was December 28th of 2021. I was all
Nice.
like, I need to wait till January. And I was like for real, that's what's stopping you right now. A few days.
How did you stay so consistent though? For I mean, it's fantastic. I know that a lot of podcasters they do it and they sort of fizzle out after like 5 episodes or 6 episodes, but you've been doing it for a year, almost year and a half. Like how do you stay consistent with
I love it. It gives me
that?
energy, and I'm crazy. That's what a lot of people say. Because I'm obsessed with it. Like I love it so much. I'm obsessed with it. And I only think about podcasting morning. And I just started a new podcast in Spanish.
Oh wow.
So I try to do it on my own, but
Mhm,
I can't, even though Spanish is my first language.
mhm,
You really wouldn't think so because I you can tell my accent, but like I speak more English than I do Spanish. Like
mhm.
Spanish is for my family. But I want to bring more content because my family watches me, on Facebook and things like that. And they're like, okay, me no speak English. So can you bring some Spanish? You did came from Puerto Rico. So, well, the first 6 months I was like on and off. I was trying to stay consistent, but I didn't know what I was going to be talking about. So I was trying to figure it out, what was going to be my message and this and that. And then about July, my virtual assistant now, she reached out to me because one of her clients, she was like, hey, I think she will be good for your podcast. And I took it as a sign from the universe that I was ready to do interviews. And that was like almost 60 interviews ago.
Wow.
So I post two podcast episodes a week.
Okay.
And my friend that I'm doing the Spanish podcast, she's like, you can do once a week. You don't have to do twice a week. And I'm like, I know, but I love it. I have so much content. Like with twice a week, this interview is gonna be published in June,
Mhm.
but we're actually recording in April.
Right.
So I love that. I in getting to know new people.
Hmm.
And my main niche is mental health. So I get a lot of coaches.
Oh, okay.
And I just want to create a community where we support one another and then share tools and resources that have helped us to survive any struggle or just to get to where you are today. I'm
All right.
very intrigued of your journey.
Well, that's awesome. I appreciate that. And I appreciate people who are like that. I feel like the same reason why I started to add interviews to my show. I've not been doing it as long as you. Well, at least not this one. I did have another podcast that I did that was a little bit longer, but it wasn't an interview show. But for me, the idea of interviewing, I think it's a little my reasoning has been a little more selfish in the sense that although I hope that the interviews that I do bring um, bring awareness and bring value to the people that listen to my podcast, it's also a chance for me to meet new people, connect with them, and sort of break the ice. And and as a writer and screenwriter, it's important for me to expand on my worldview. So learning other ways of seeing how the world is and seeing how other people, because we all see the world differently and we all have different perspectives on what things are and what things aren't. And getting to talk to people every single month, I get a different perspective on how to see the world. And it helps with my writing, but it also just helps with inspiration for getting through the day. Sometimes when I'm not feeling my best, I'll listen to an interview that I did where somebody said something that was really, really powerful, and sometimes it helps to just sort of pull me out of that. So yeah, I can definitely relate to that.
Do you have like a survival kit? I created one for myself when it comes to my mental
No, I
health.
don't. Well, what's in that? What's in that? That
So
sounds.
it's pretty much basic things that you need to
Mhm.
bring you back to yourself.
Oh wow.
Because one, I deal with anxiety a lot,
Hmm.
and that when once I'm in the danger zone, like that's it. No logic, no nothing. I'm in the danger zone. I'm about to freak out. Either slap me or don't do that. But
Don't.
I'm just I'm very sarcastic.
Yeah,
like like slap me or take me to the hospital because I can't breathe.
right.
So, anyways, it's like things like breathing, so you remind yourself, like, okay, take a deep breath because something is off.
Hmm.
So, let's calm your system down. Then, when that doesn't work, I either walk it out or dance it out. If I'm at home, I'm definitely having a dance party, to get me out of it because you got to get your body out of movement to switch your brain. They say like pay attention to five things in the room or look for colors or things like that. I don't have time for that. My brain doesn't work like that. So
Right.
I have to have a system. So that's step 2, step 3. Then I am a religious a Christian, a spiritual person. So
Hmm.
it's either prayer or positive thoughts, to start coming in. I use Pinterest quotes
Okay.
sometimes when I need to reset my brain,
Hmm.
and then ask for support, of your friends. I have a very a small circle, but that circle knows about my mental health diagnosis, which is 7 of them: anxiety, depression, bipolar, ADHD symptoms because of trauma, PTSD because of trauma, codependency, and anger issues. And so that my close family, well, the whole internet knows now. But my close family, they know how to reach out. But that's like the things that I remember to do to get me to feel back to the present moment and feeling like, okay, it has passed. So it's just like that. Sometimes just taking a deep breath here and there, it works, and you're fine to go, just to remind yourself to breathe. But when does that doesn't work, then it's like you have to have a backup system to get you back feeling
Makes
like you
sense.
want to be feel.
That definitely makes sense. I don't personally have one, but I think that that's something that I should invest in, invest some time in putting together for myself. um so for me, my mental health diagnosis is, I have schizoaffective disorder, which is, for your listeners, if they're familiar or not familiar, the best way to describe it is it's almost like a hybrid of bipolar and schizophrenia. And so I deal with a lot of hallucinations, auditory and visual, as well as the mood swings and the anxiety and depression that tends to come with, um, as well as some of the mania that comes with
Yeah.
bipolar. So I deal with those. I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was a kid, but I've come to not fully accept that diagnosis simply because I'm a firm believer, and this is just my belief, but I'm a firm believer that ADHD is something that shouldn't really be diagnosed until a person is, an adult, simply just because I feel like a lot of the symptoms that go along with ADHD could be misconstrued, um, or some of the symptoms are oftentimes the same behaviors that most children exhibit anyway. And
Mm-hmm.
so it can be very difficult to really accurately diagnose that. And so I feel like as you learn to, react to things in a more, reasonable manner and behave in a more reasonable manner, then I feel like you're able to sort of assess what's out of the ordinary versus what's ordinary, for an adult per se. Um, and so I don't know. So I don't know if I necessarily have ADHD. I've never been tested after I was a kid. I never got tested again.
Mm-hmm.
So I've never really like clung to that as kind of like something that, uh I identify as a person who deals with that. But yeah, that's pretty much what I struggle with. I also struggle with social anxiety, and yeah, those are my things. um
And for me, I'm over here like, oh my gosh, your brain. Sorry, I don't want to offend you, but like my thing is like, your brain has to be so freaking amazing. I know that it's a struggle and it's hard in some places, but that explains the filmmaker
Mhm.
part of you, and I just love it. Like for me, every time, like, I don't know, I just get excited because it's just how the brain works,
Right.
because it's so amazing. And I do agree with you when it comes to the kids and diagnosis. I think it should be more of an adult conversation,
Mhm.
not part of the kid, depending on the scenario of what's happening.
Right.
Just because for kids it's such a big deal, whatever you tell them, that
Mhm.
they might not be able to process. Like if I got my diagnosis when I was a kid, I don't think I will comprehend what's happening, of
Right.
more of working with the parents
Right.
to give them tools to change how they treat the kids without them knowing.
Exactly.
In a sense, depending on the situation, because I have a friend that her daughter has some major diagnosis, and like she has to have the conversation with her because of the tantrums and everything else that's happening when she's going into big emotions. And I
Mhm.
love the way that she speak to her, because I'm like, I wish a grown-up would speak to me like that right now. Like, you're feeling big emotions right now, so now, how we can bring you to a happy place? Do you know your happy emotion? How can we get to that? And I'm like, can we do that right now? Because sometimes I get mixed up with all of the emotions and things
Right,
like that.
right.
But yeah, so yeah, I just, it's the brain part that I'm like, oh my God, your brain has to be so freaking
Yeah,
amazing.
I'm
When
not I'm not offended by that at all. Like I just had a conversation with my niece who also struggles with um mental health, mental illness and things of that nature. We used to have a podcast called Family Therapy where we would talk about
ooh.
philosophy and stuff like that, but and mental health stuff. And it was really about two different generations. So it was a
Mm,
millennial, such as myself, and then her as a Gen Z um, person. Uh, our views on society and emotions and mental health and stuff like that, and we we put all of our family drama and family tea, if you will, out for the world to see. But we took a break because she had to deal with some things and I did too. But we had a conversation recently where she had mentioned um, she was worried about the name, the mentally ill filmmaker, and she was worried that people would react to it negatively or think that I'm defining myself from my mental health or my mental illness. And I explained to her that I don't think of it that way because to me, and I hope that anybody who struggles with mental illness takes this piece to heart. Because for me, I truly believe that mental illness, regardless of how you look at it, regardless of the dark times that it may cause you, is a superpower. It's a
it
superpower
is.
because it will alter the way that you see the world. It will change it. I think the most cool, rounded people that I know struggle with mental illness. We're often more empathetic than most people. We are often we're just kinder more often than not. We tend to give people more chances than they deserve. We it's just the
Yeah.
people that I know are that way, and I think it's just because we see the world differently. And so when I say I'm the mentally ill filmmaker, it's a badge of honor to me. I wear that like Superman wears the S on his chest. It's something that to me, I wouldn't be who I am today if I didn't have the illness that I have. And so, and I'm proud of it. I'm proud of the things that I've learned about myself, the things I've learned about other people. You know, I spent time in a hospital and a few hospitals and a few group homes, and I met so many people that were so different, that were so interesting, that changed the way I look at the world and the way that I approach people and the compassion that I have for people is all due to me having this illness and the route that this illness has taken me on, the path that this illness has taken me on, has made me a more roundabout person. And I'm grateful for that. And that is why, as bad as some days get,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't change it for the world because I wouldn't be who I am today without it. So um yeah, I'm just I'm proud of it.
Yeah, I gotta say I agree with you, because I do see it, my mental health, as my superpower. And then it wasn't until I got the diagnosis that I was able to give myself some compassion and some grace, because there's no way that my bestie will come up with to me and tell me all of that and me treat her like shit.
Right.
But it coming to me, I treat myself like shit,
Mm-hmm.
and I have unrealistic expectations. Now, when I understood a little bit more about the bipolar, like now that I'm more self-aware and I can acknowledge where I'm at, when I am triggered, that I can feel the bipolar, that I'm like literally I'm like it is an out of body experience, because you're like, okay, I don't want to be this angry. I don't want to be this out of control, but I'm feeling my body like, oh, it's about to come out. And now to be able to like, okay,
Mhm.
and bring myself back, that's a damn superpower.
Right.
And people don't understand and don't give people enough credit of having that control to be like, okay, I know that there's something different about my brain,
Mhm.
so I have to take different actions when it comes to dealing with people or dealing with myself. And the self-awareness and the inner child work, inner work, I mean, all the stuff that you have to do to just deal with today.
Mhm.
People just usually just wake up
Yeah.
and start their day and let's go do this. For us, sometimes it might take hours, it might take days to get the shit done, but we still get it done. So I'm
Right.
proud of you for that,
Thank
man.
you. Thank you. And I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you as well. And that's true. You're right. There's some people that, yeah, they can get up and they go about the day and it's nothing to them. Or everybody has their thing. Everybody has
Hmm.
stuff that's bothering them, things that are going on. Everybody deals with depression in one to
No, oh
one,
yeah.
one extent or another. But for those of us that have a little bit more to carry, I think sometimes it's easy for us to look at it from the perspective of, I wish it was easier for me. And I know for me that was definitely something that I thought a lot of. I wish it was more like, my wife. My wife is an extrovert and she loves to be out in the world and talking to people, social butterfly and all of that. And I'm introverted and I have social anxiety. So sometimes I watch her talk to people and I watch her interact with people and I wish I could be more like that. But then I think about it and I realize the fact that I have social anxiety, the fact that I'm introverted, it makes me more observant. It makes me more of a person who takes a step back and observes what's going on. I listen more than I talk, and I hear. And because I listen more than I talk, I understand people, and I'm a better judge of character than a lot of other people that I know, simply because I pick up on the things that other people wouldn't necessarily pick up on because they're not looking or they're not seeing it. And so while our world sometimes moves a little bit slower than other people's, sometimes slower is better, because sometimes when things are slower, when you get anxious about things, you get anxious about them oftentimes because you're worried about certain things. You're worried about something because you're far more observant of what could happen, than somebody who rushes into it and then things go horribly wrong for them. You have that ability to stop and say, no, I can see all the different possible scenarios of where this can go really bad for me, and that makes me super anxious. Or if you get depressed, it's because I feel like people who get depressed a lot of times it's because we feel things far deeper, and our emotions our heart is so much bigger, and it's and then within that, the things that hurt us, the things that scare us, the things that bother us all come from a sense of life going a little bit slower for us. And it's like, I always think having a mental illness is kind of like the rest of the world is watching a movie on regular speed and we are watching the world at half speed. We're watching the world a little bit slower. So we're noticing all the things that everybody else just sort of speeds by. And because we watch all the things that everybody else just seems to speed by, we feel all of those things. We feel it, we sense them, we get anxious about them, we get depressed about them, we get we get frustrated, we get angry, we get all those different things because we have the time to stop and take a look at all that while everybody else is kind of like, I don't have time to that. And while some people may see that as a flaw, I see that as beautiful. I see it as amazing. It may not always feel good, and that's kind of the curse of it being that way. Is it doesn't always feel good, but it's it allows us to see the world more deeply than most people can. And like I said, that ultimately is a superpower. That's something that you can't really describe to other people that don't get it, that don't understand it. And it's why I think and that's specifically dealing with mental illness, not so much just handling mental health, because handling mental health, that is something that we all need to do, no matter who you are. We all have things, and we all have to make sure that we're mentally okay and that we're mentally processing the things that are going on. Another thing I had a conversation with someone about was trauma, and
Yeah.
how often we are neglectful to of our trauma. Like there's some things that we'll know. Like if somebody abused you, or treated you in a really horrible way, or you went through like a really traumatic experience, we acknowledge those things. But when it comes to something like, I don't know, somebody cheats on you, or somebody made you feel embarrassed at work, or you tripped and fell in front of a bunch of people, or any of those types of things, those things are also trauma. And we tend to discount them or discredit them and say, it's not a big deal, or it's it happens to everybody, so it's why should I make a big deal out of it? I think it's important to acknowledge all trauma and validate all trauma, no matter what it is. There's nothing too small. If it impacted you in any type of way, it's important to acknowledge it. It's important to validate it and make sure it's seen. Um, it doesn't have to be seen by the rest of the world, but at least you yourself can say, this is something I went through. This is something that happened to me, and I acknowledge it. I validate it. I see it, and now I'm able to move on. I feel like people can't do that, or people tend to become passive aggressive or do all kinds of other things because they don't acknowledge the traumas that they feel, and they tend to sort of shrug it away or brush it
It's
off.
a hard one because I dealt with guilt and shame and responsibility that didn't belong to me.
Mm,
So that's a lot of people that have survived something hard. That's one of their stopping points.
right,
So I couldn't say mine out loud because of the guilt of the shame was so
right.
big
And I
that
can
when
definitely
I
understand that too.
finally was able to say it out loud, oh yeah, the release was amazing. I even talked about it in one of my podcast episodes. But yeah, that shame and guilt will eat you
Mm,
alive.
right. And I agree with that. I completely agree with that. And for those types, like I said, that kind of stuff, it's heavy, and that does take it takes a little time to work through those things. I mean, I'm more referring to some of the stuff that we tend to dismiss as small.
Mm-hmm.
Um, kind of like when you're with kids, and a kid trips and falls, or scrapes their knee, and we have a tendency, people say, you have some people in the school of thought where they say, oh, if you make it a thing, the kid will make it a thing. As opposed to, there are other people who tend to believe, acknowledging that if your kid is crying because they tripped or they bumped their head or they did whatever, acknowledging that, and acknowledging that they experienced a level of trauma to themselves, something that made them feel something, like you said, big emotions, something that made
Mm-hmm.
them feel big emotions. Acknowledging that is not a bad thing, and learning to teach our children, as well as to do it ourselves, is to learn when we need to acknowledge when something triggers a big emotion for us, no matter what it is. And we have people can be so dismissive, I feel like sometimes,
Yeah.
of what people do feel. If I saw somebody get hit by a car, or I saw something that for other people, it didn't happen to you, you didn't know the person, why are you, it's like, but no, that it affected me, and it made me feel, like you said, big emotions, and I need to kind of feel that and accept that, and then I'll be ready to move on when I'm ready to move on. um but I think learning to just sort of validate what we feel, what we experience, um is imperative for growth as a human being.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. So yeah, where can my listeners find you?
You can find me at my website, the www.thementallyillfilmmaker.com. Um, and ultimately, all my social media links are there. My podcast is there. My blog is there. So yeah, just thementallyillfilmmaker.com.
Awesome. I will put that in the description of the episode. And I really have to say, like, I love that name. Like,
Thank you.
like a lot of people might not get it, but like I get it, dude, and that was awesome.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, anyways, hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. You can find my podcast in all major platforms as well as my YouTube channel. So you know the drill. Like and subscribe. Hope you have a blessed day.